Damon, when John had mentioned this concept in the paper of developers developers have a role in providing proof that something has happened.
Yeah.
And when we talk about this subject of automated governance,
Mhm.
is it really automated governance or is it automated attestations?
I mean, this is I think shows you the disconnect, right? I mean, because just going back, like what was DevOps all about, right? I mean, it's the fast feedback loops, all those things. But think about it as like removing this friction, right? How can we go faster so we can get faster feedback and find the right path forward? And I think as a dev and ops, combined industry, like we cared about like the outcome is what matters, right? But if you then go and talk to executives, like what does executive of an enterprise do, right? It's capital allocation and management of risk, right? So like suddenly how you do it actually matters in a lot of ways as much as what the outcome is, right? Because that's the key for managing risk, right? And so, I think that's what governance is, right? And so it's a probabilistic kind of like, risk management thing, right? And I think we just thought of governance as like, oh yeah, it's the, check in to see what you do thing. When the reality is there is a difference between that job, right? And just proving that you did what you said you did, right? Which is the kind of foundational layer to governance. And if you do that, then the governance folks can actually spend all their time worrying about actual governance, right? So I think that was an interesting moment that I think we went from like kind of like the DevOps movement itself. It started with like, oh, it's all a deployment problem because that's where the flashpoint is, and then you kind of pull it on the threads, and it's like this bigger and bigger, and it's a whole big system problem, right? And I think that's the same thing we're seeing here. Is we thought it was like just kind of this one problem, and the more you pull on it, we realize like, oh, this is a bigger rounder, problem than we had expected. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question the way you wanted, but I mean, I think that is a difference, right? It's just even understanding the terminology. So we can go to the second line, third line people, right? Like the GRC or the compliance people, and then the internal auditors, even someday maybe external auditors. Like, it just shows that like conceptually we're even far apart, which is like how it was in the early days of DevOps, where dev just saw the world one way, ops saw the world another way. If a dev showed up at a same conference as an ops person, somebody was in the wrong place, right? Kind of like today, I would say ETLS, we have the who's who of people doing big new things at the biggest enterprises in the world. I would venture there's not a second or third line person here, right? And if you go to an auditor's, conference, these, ISAC or these big things, you're not going to see Dopo, right? I mean, it's just, he's not there, right? So no offense. I mean, he can go there, but like, I'm saying, like, it's just not, but by trade, it's not, he might, because he's actually more curious, but you're not going to see those people, right? And I think that we're in that same place where the DevOps movement was, where it was like two circles of excellence who both think each other are kind of idiots and fighting about it all the time.
The core kind of conflict, though, which has to be pointed out, which is the whole motivation for that paper, was there was a lot of toil in the process, and it was ineffective. So we wanted to reduce the toil. So we wanted to come up a way so you didn't, because the other question I asked Topo, people tell me that they spend at least 4 to 6 weeks every year of just having calls and emails and exchanges, and it's just a waste of everybody.
Oh God!
Yeah, like could we create a digitally signed attestation, and then like the efficacy, because the attestations was a ServiceNow ticket that said I did this, this. Go check the log if you don't believe me, right? So the two principles were part of that the initial statement of that paper, which was, could we create digitally signed attestations and, and reduce the toil and make it so like auditor, like, unless you don't believe RSA encryption, like, this is it.
This data thing was laughing when you said that, because it's like, I remember some of the early kind of run deck use cases we saw, runbook automation use cases we saw around people doing this kind of work was like, oh, they'd use the scheduler to fire off these different scripts and these different machines. And then they would go like once a month into basically the history, right? And just click on each job and hit the print screen button, right? And it was, first of all, just kind of shocked me, like that's where we're at. Secondly, I always wonder what the print screen button was for. I didn't realize it was a governance tool.
Yeah.
But like, that's what they did, right? Print screen, PDF, like why? And it was just like you then attach those to a ServiceNow ticket, right? That was the process. And these are some of like the most forward-looking kind of, hotshot, on the DevOps stages, organizations in the world. I think that's just how things worked, right? And nobody wanted it that way. Kind of like in the original DevOps, keep coming back to this point of the original sort of DevOps conversations. Nobody wanted it to be broken, right? But it just was. And to the point where nobody wanted to even talk about